Hey, well, thanks everyone for coming. My name is Jameel KHALFAN. I work at Pocket Gems and currently lead our publishing group. Before that, I was working on paid user acquisition and led the campaigns for TapZoo and Tap Pet Hotel, which are the #1 and #4 top grossing apps in 2011. And before that, I had some experience in venture capital, and I was a product manager at Microsoft. So I know the last session that you probably went to, self-publish or die, seemed kind of morose. I'll go over some of the same things in terms of why you should publish or why you shouldn't, but I've come to different conclusions. So I'm going to give you some background on Pocket Gems and then speak about what a free-to-play publisher should do for you, and then how to best work with one. I think it's not for everyone, but it certainly works for a lot of different people. And then after that, we can go through a couple case studies. So Pocket Gems is a mobile gaming startup. We were founded in 2009, backed by Sequoia Capital, and we've had over 100 million downloads on mobile. The company started out on mobile only, sort of one of the newer gaming companies. We didn't start on desktop. We started on mobile right away. And globally, we're a top 15 grossing publisher last year. Okay, so to figure out, do you need a publisher? There's a lot of different things you need to consider. So I think the first one is the free-to-play game design expertise. Think about, is this something that you're really good at? For those people that came from online games, they might be experts at this already. Others that might come from a console background, this might be a little bit more new for you. The next is a platform experience. So on iOS and specifically on Android, just having the experience there. On Android, there's a lot of different devices out there, a lot of different OSs. And so making sure that you can have your game work across all of those and get as many users as possible is very important. And then on the user acquisition side of things, do you have a network that you can cross-promote users to? Do you already have some games out there? And do you have the funding for the paid marketing? Everybody talks about CPIs. So can you actually fund the marketing? And then can you run the operations for user acquisition? So I think if you can do all of that, then you should give a shot at self-publishing. But if you're not ready, then you can look for a good partner who can make your game really successful. So I'm going to go through a few of the different things that I think a free-to-play publisher should do for you to help your game out. And so I think the first one is cross-promotion. So here's a bunch of different games that Pocket Gems has put out. The one in the bottom right is the Airport Scanner, a game we recently launched through a publishing initiative with a company called Kedlin Company. And so that's a published game. And so the way that our cross-promotion works is we're going to find the right users for the games that we publish, which I think is important. So we have a wide range of games, different types of users. And so we'll know which games we should promote users from into the other games to get the best users possible for each game. So then I think this is probably the most difficult piece here on the paid user acquisition. There's a lot of different companies out there that you can work with. I'm sure many of them are here today, and they're all going to tell you, just work with us and we'll get you millions of installs overnight. That's usually not the case, though. And so if you want to do it right, you have to work with a lot of the companies on this list. Some of them will give you good installs, great users, and some of them will give you users who aren't quite as good. Which might be okay as long as you know how much to pay for those users relative to the other ones. So in order to do this, you have to have the infrastructure built to connect to all of these different companies through their APIs, or maybe put their SDK into your game. You have to be able to get all the reporting on a weekly basis from them, and optimize your bids every week to try and figure out, is the traffic this week good from this company, or is it bad? Should we pay more or less for US versus Canada? So those are a lot of things you need to consider. Otherwise, you could end up losing a lot of money very quickly. So this is something that I spent a lot of my time doing at Pocket Gems before working on publishing. And then the other piece, both on cross-promotion, paid, and also just to get organic traffic, is just the optimization. And so what we found is that there are a lot of different users out there who like different things. And that might not be the same as what I think looks good or what our artist thinks looks good. So whenever we decide to make a new ad, we always make a bunch of different versions and test them to figure out which one should be the one that we put out there. And I think the same thing is going to be true for a lot of the different creative that you do. So You want to make sure that your ad here is consistent with your App Store description page and the screenshots in terms of the style and the theme and all of that. So the people that click your ad are then going to go actually download the game because they're going to see a consistent experience. So I think it's really important to make sure that you optimize these things ahead of time. Otherwise, every user who goes to your description page, that's a potential user. You want to make sure that you don't lose them at that last step. So then in addition to the user acquisition piece, I think there's a few other things that are really important. So the first one is tech, and I don't hear this one talked a lot about at a lot of these different talks. So for analytics tools for your game, especially for free-to-play, they're very important. And there's some stuff you can get for free off the net, but we found that those types of free tools don't usually do enough to help you really get the insights into your game and monetize it well. So we built our own backend over the last 4 years and our own set of analytics tools, and they're very different from what I see out there. So I think that that's important to make sure that you either have that on your own, or if you're working with a free-to-play publisher, that they have that for you. If they tell you to just go online and download something for free, that might be a red flag. So then the other thing is to connect your game to all those different ad networks. I think there's over 100 different ones on there. You're going to need to put an SDK into your game for each one, or you're going to have to build infrastructure to connect server-side to all of those networks, and then have your own SDK in the game. So that's something to look out for when talking to publishers is, are they going to make you put 100 different SDKs in your game, or have they already built all that infrastructure to do that for you? Then the next thing is on product, and I hear this a lot, especially from smaller game developers who might have worked with publishers before, is that you want to make sure that the publisher gives you great advice, especially on the free-to-play game mechanics, but doesn't require you to do anything. So the publisher should respect the creative vision of the developer, and they should let them go and give them advice, but let them make the changes themselves if they decide that that's best for the game. And then I think overall, the publisher should make sure that the deal terms are very fair and the incentives are aligned. So you should make sure that if the publisher is going to make more money, in one scenario, the developer should also be able to make more money, and vice versa. You shouldn't be in a situation where the developer does something and it only benefits them, or the publisher does something and it only benefits them, because that can create the wrong types of incentives. And then lastly, I think the relationship overall should just be collaborative. It shouldn't be combative or anything like that. You want to make sure you have a good relationship with the publisher, and you can discuss new ideas and brainstorm things together and make sure that you're both working in the best interests of the game. Okay, so now I have some advice for game developers on how you can best work with the publisher. So this is based on conversations that I've had with a lot of different game developers, things that I've heard them ask, and some things that I haven't heard them ask that I wish they did. So the first thing is to make sure you develop a fun and engaging game. I don't know how many times I've had people come up and say like, oh, I have a game. It's not very fun yet, but maybe you can fix that. So make sure your game is fun and engaging before you come to the publisher. I think that's the best way to start things off. Secondly, this kind of goes in line with the first one, but make sure you spend a lot of time thinking about the core loop and the game mechanics. The other thing I hear from a lot of developers is, well, I have a fun game, but I don't know how to monetize it. So there's no IAPs in it, but you can do that for me, right? So that's not something that the publisher should do for you. I think it's something that you could do, learn about and try out on your own, and then the publisher can help you to make it better or optimize it, give you some analytics insights, things like that. So make sure you've really thought about the core loop and the game mechanics and what the player is going to be doing in the game, what motivates them to spend money or not spend money or come back and play the next day. So then the other one is to treat the game as an ongoing service rather than a finished product. And so I think you might see this more from the console backgrounds. When you finish the game is done and then it goes out. And then maybe there's like an update after that. But I think the reality is for free-to-play games, it's going to be an ongoing service. You have to have different new content coming into the game. A lot of companies do these weekly events, or they'll put in new quests and things like that. So make sure that once you launch the game, you decide that that's sort of day one for the game. And then you continuously issue out new updates after that and put in more content for your users. And then lastly is to continue to look at the data from the game after the launch and then think about what are the next steps based on the data. And so a lot of developers, I think, will sort of look at the data and see like, oh, well, what happened to retention the second day? Like maybe I should go and change the tutorial a bit, or maybe I should go make some things easier or harder. And so I think that's something you need to do once the game launches to make sure you're constantly making the best experience for the users. And then I also put together some questions. So these are the things that I kind of wish that developers would ask me. And if they do ask me, then that's usually a good sign to me that they've done their homework and they're a good partner to work with. So the first one is how many of your games have been in the top charts? A lot of people will ask that, but might not ask about, well, what about the free charts or what about the grossing charts? They're very, very different things. If you're working on a free-to-play game and you expect it to have high monetization, then you should make sure that the publisher you go with also has games with high monetization that end up in the top grossing charts. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to help you very much on the free-to-play piece or on the user acquisition piece. The next one is, how do you think about user acquisition? And so this one, almost no one asks me. And so some of the questions I think are important are, how many user acquisition channels are you integrated with? So looking back to that slide with all those logos on it, how many of those have you tested? How many of those have you screened and decided to use or not use? And then how many of the ones that were good did you actually integrate with your technology? That's something that I think, if the publisher talks to you and says, oh, well, there's like one or two, maybe three, then that might also raise a red flag. If you walk around the room today, you'll find a ton of them. So it would be important for them to have looked at them, they know who they are, they've tried them out, and then they decide whether to use them or not use them for your game. The next one is, how big is the network for cross-promotion? So if you have a game and you want a publisher to publish it, they'll say like, well, we'll promote the game, but then how much? How big is their network? How many installs can they actually drive to your game before everyone's already seen it and then no one wants to download it anymore? And then the last thing, and I don't think anyone's ever asked this, is what do you do to help with the organic traffic and the optimization? So things like App Store optimization or SEO, things like optimizing the ads and doing the creative optimization and figuring out, this blue ad is better than the pink ad, but only in this country, and the pink ad is better than the blue ad in that country. So being able to do things like that to really help drive the most users to your game. Because whenever a user sees an ad or goes to your App Store page, that's an opportunity for them to become a player. And so you want to make sure that you've already done everything to increase the likelihood of that happening. And then lastly, which people will I be working with and what's their background and game credit? I think you might get to know the salesperson or the BD person at the publisher, but what happens after you sign the deal? Then who do you get? Do you get stuck with someone afterwards that has no experience, or do you get an experienced producer to work with you, or the people that are doing user acquisition for your game? What have they done before? Do they actually know what they're doing? So look into the people that you'll actually be working with after you end up signing with the publisher. Okay, so now I'll go through a couple of case studies on some games that we'd published and give you an idea of some of the things that we did for the developers and how it turned out. So the first one is Chasing Yellow. So this is an endless runner game, or I should say swimmer game, by DreamFab and Tactile Entertainment in Germany and Denmark. So they had made a game on iOS. It was really successful, really popular, and they wanted to move over to Android. They had tried putting some games on Android, but they'd had some trouble, especially with QA, because there's so many different devices out there. So the photo here is some of our QA devices for Android from our lab. It's only a small section of the devices, I think, that that we have. And so in order to help them out, we've done some talks on QA before. We were invited to Google to give a Google Hangout down there to help developers with QA for Android. So that's something that we shared with them. And we were able to tell them, here are the devices that you should care about for QA, and here are the OSs that you should care about for QA. And if you do this, then you'll have the best coverage to make sure your game works really well. And then here's some other tips and tricks you can do, some things you can put into your game to make sure that it works well across as many devices as possible. The second thing was user acquisition. Just getting the users on Android, if you're just starting out, that could be difficult if it's your first game. So helping them with that. And cross-promotion in the Pocket Gems network, you're getting the game out there and getting it out to as many users as possible. So the results, the game launched in December of last year. It was featured on Google Play. It reached the top 5 free apps in the first week, and within the first 2 weeks, it was downloaded over 2.3 million times. So you can see the chart at the bottom from App Annie. The game did really well. The developer was happy, I think, with the number of downloads that they got, which far exceeded what they had done on their own on Android in the past. So the next one is Amazing Ants. So this is a game that we launched in January of this year. And so this game was developed by a company called Twingo. They were a small startup. They're here in the Bay Area. This was their first game that they'd ever made. And so I think the requirements here were a little bit different for them than for an experienced iOS game developer moving to Android. So here, given that it was their first game, we spent a lot of time with them on product feedback and giving them advice on the game design. So they sat down with our product managers and presented the game concept and their ideas, and we sort of checked in with them to see how things were going, gave them suggestions for new features and new things that they should add to the game, and just gave them feedback on what they've done. So I think for them that helped a lot, in them learning about more about free-to-play game design and taking what they did and helping them iterate on it. The second thing that was important for them is on PR. So given that they're a brand new company and it's the first game that they made, it's hard to get press for that if you're new to the industry and you've never done gaming before. So getting the company's name out there was really important for them for hiring, for investors, for things like that. And then also just in general, they wanted the game out there in the news, and they wanted people to see about it. So we spent a lot of time with them on that, and if you go search through the news, they were on VentureBeat and Inside Social and 148 Apps and Pocket Gamer, and so we were able to get them a lot of press for the game, which I think helped them out tremendously. I think the day after a lot of the articles came out, I got a call from them, and they said that all these monetization companies and UA companies keep calling me all the time. So I guess the article worked. So I think they're happy with the amount of press that they got. And so the results for this game, similar to Chasing Yellow, the game was featured by Apple in the App Store. It was downloaded over 2.2 million times in 2 weeks. It was the #1 free game on iPad in 35 countries. And then I think more importantly for the company, having successful game launch and successful PR, the company was acquired by another game company called Mind Pirate, which is a venture-backed game company, which they just announced a couple weeks ago. So I think everything worked out really well for them, especially given that this is their first game that they'd ever made, and they're now working with a larger team and hopefully making more great games. Okay, so that's all I have. I want to leave some time for questions if anyone has anything. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that one of the key points for any studio looking for a publishing deal is to have a fair deal between the game maker and the publisher. What, in your opinion, constitutes a fair deal?
So I think it depends on the situation, and I think that's why it might not have worked out in the past for some developers. You can't just give the same deal to everyone. The two examples I just showed you, one company needed a lot of help on Android QA, the other one needed help on a different set of things. So I think it depends on what the developer's needs are, how much work is going to go into the game by the publisher. If the publisher's not going to do anything and they're just going to sort of stick it in the App Store and do some promotion, that might be fine. But the developer should know that and make sure the deal terms reflect that that's their contribution. The publisher is going to do more work on the game, and help out in other ways, and you should make sure that the deal terms are adjusted such that the publisher wants to go in and do that, and they're incented to do that. So I think it depends on from deal to deal, but in general, both parties should want to work really hard to make the game successful. So if you're ever in a situation where someone doesn't want to do something because it's not really worth it for them, then that's where I think you messed up on the deal terms. Yeah, in the front.
Let's say sometimes
I want to make sure that we get the questions on the recording, so I'm going to hand you the microphone, okay?
Let's say a game starts out slow in sales. What's your strategy then? Or at what point do you actually cut your losses? Or what do you try to do to try to accelerate sales?
Yeah, so we look at the data for the game as soon as it launches. And so given that we publish free-to-play games, it's not that hard to get people to download them, especially if you have a big network. So we've had over 100 million downloads of our games, so it's not very hard for us to get users into a game. But what we'll do is we'll look at the retention rate for the game, see how many people are coming back the next day to come back and play. And so if it's not doing that well, then we'll have to sit down and sort of brainstorm and think about, well, what went wrong? What can we change in the game? How can we make it better? And then once the metrics are good and positive and we're happy with them, then we can ramp up sales or ramp up marketing for the game. And so because everything is so real time, within the first day or two after the game's out there, you kind of know how it's going to do. And that's when you can make some changes and make some tweaks and then decide to either ramp things up or keep them where they are or scale them down while you're making some changes and then go back out again.
You mentioned cross-promotion a number of times. Can you give an idea of what percentage contribution to the installs you'd expect to get from cross-promo and if there's any difference in quality of the traffic?
Yeah. So I think there's two pieces for cross-promotion depending on how you do it. For games like these that just launched, the cross-promotion really helped them get into the charts. And then once you're in the charts, you'll see a lot of organic traffic come in that way. What we found is that the value of the users that come from cross-promotion is usually very good. Oftentimes better than what you have from someone that just kind of sees it in the App Store. So we think it's a good way to get the core group of dedicated, engaged users in the game, because they're already playing your other games, so you know that they're good users, into the game. And then once it gets into the charts, then everyone kind of sees it, and they'll go download the game from there.
I have a question for the audience. Could I see a show of hands of people in the audience who are developers that are actively looking for a publishing partner? And given the previous statement that maybe self-publishing is easy, why are you doing that? Somebody want to share? Nobody wants to share. Come on. Why are you looking for a publisher?
Hi, so I'm from Games to Win. We have 30 million downloads across 15 or 20 of our apps on iOS and Android. Parking Frenzy was a game that we made. And it's not enough. It's not enough. 30 million is not enough. You need 300 million to make it a sustainable model. And like you said, if you're focusing on just downloads and downloads alone, then you need velocity, you need momentum, and I think you need 1 billion downloads to matter.
So scale is a good reason, yeah? So we do need to move on to our next session, but I want to say thank you to Jameel. And of course, if you'd like to talk to him after his session, he's going to be here, and I'm sure you can snag him before he gets out the door.